Good morning, everybody. I'm back here in London. And, you know, I'm getting bored with this every single morning constant diet of negativity that we get from mainstream media and so many in our political class. Today's is in The Observer. Will Hutton writes, life expectancy figures have gone into decline, but abandoning Brexit could reverse this. And within the article, and it's very nice of him actually, he calls me an evil genius. Well, a very happy Sunday morning to you, Will, as well. So there you are. Brexit means you're going to die younger. Brexit means there could be huge pandemics. There is, and we heard earlier on this morning, people telling us on LBC that there's huge demand now to reverse Brexit, to stop Brexit. It's all going wrong. And the debate that goes on constantly is within political parties, splits in the Tory party, some splits in the Labour Party. And the one group of people who are not involved in the Brexit debate at all are you, the public. No. You're not supposed to have a say. Leave it to your betters. Leave it to those who are much cleverer than you and understand what you need in your life. In fact, the only time since the Brexit referendum on 23rd of June 16 that you've been consulted was in a general election in which both the Labour and Conservative parties told you, vote for us and we'll leave the single market, we'll take back control of our borders, and we know now, of course, a year on, that simply wasn't true. They were fibbing to us because they wanted us to vote for them. Well, I have a hunch, I really do have a hunch, that if the public were given any sort of lead on this, if the public were given the opportunity to express their opinion, then our politicians might just be in for the shock of their lives. Well, lo and behold, I turned to the centre page this morning of The Sun on Sunday and saw a very, very powerful piece of polling. So just before I came on air, I spoke to The Sun on Sunday's political editor, David Wooding, and I asked him, how is it that Brexit voters in the country are really feeling at the moment?
We ask quite a lot of questions on Brexit, Nigel, because there's been so many people suggesting that people are having buyer's remorse and that they want a second referendum. And so we dug down into it and asked a little bit more deeply and found that actually attitudes are hardening. 62% of people in our Delta poll don't want to, they haven't changed their mind. In fact, they're far more intent on believing what they believe in. Okay, that's both sides. But the people who have changed their mind, there's only 11% of leavers have changed their mind. But crucially, the people who are changing their mind most are Remainers. 15% of them have changed their minds. Now, I got my little fact pack out and a pen and did a few maths, and it works out that there's about 2.4 million Remainers in an election would vote Leave now, as opposed to about 1.8, 1.9 leavers who might vote Remain. So if there was a second referendum, there's no doubt it could possibly go the other way. It could be even stronger in favour of Leave.
What is the key reason, David, that Remainers are now saying no, Brexit's the right thing?
Well, there's no great explanation for that, but I would suggest one of the reasons is we were always told that the European Union isn't ruling our lives as much as we think. And what's become clear as we've tried to disentangle ourselves from the grip of Brussels is that, in fact, it's far more entrenched and deep-rooted into our lives than we ever thought in the first place. And they've also been a little bit put off by the bullying and the intransigence of Brussels, the unelected people who are pushing us around. And thirdly, Project Fear. We were told that the sky was going to fall in, and it's 2 years since Brexit, and we're all getting along quite nicely, thank you. It's just the negotiations that are causing us all the trouble.
Yes, and also a constant diet of negativity. I mean, just put on the BBC, put on Sky News, and every single day there are endless stories about disaster that could befall the country if there's a no-deal Brexit. Would it be fair to say that our political class in Westminster, in both the main parties, are pretty out of touch with public opinion?
Yes, indeed. One of the things the poll shows is that nearly half of people, 48%, think that the political classes are deliberately dragging their heels, trying to make heavy weather of Brexit talks in order to convince the public that they'll have to change their minds. It's just too difficult to do this. Look, we told you it was going to be hard. Look at the mess it's creating. Let's just not do it, eh? And I think that's what's happening here. They're deliberately putting up obstacles that aren't there. We've seen it from the European Union with the Irish border, and I think more and more people are seeing through this. And the message that comes through loud and clear in our poll today is just get on with it. You know, we've given you the instructions to do it. Stop messing around. Just get on with it.
David, as you probably know, I'm about to go back on the road and do some public rallies and get a battle bus going. I think from this I might get quite a good reception.
It does look good. It does look that way. I mean, the main thing that comes through from the poll about the politicians, the mainstream politicians, Theresa May, Jeremy Corbyn, and Vince Cable, they're all in negative popularity. Nobody likes any of them and what they're doing. But nevertheless, people still feel that Brexit has to happen, and I think that's the main message from that. Nearly half of Brits think we should leave the EU on March the 29th, with or without a deal, like it or not. That comes through quite emphatically in our poll.
Well, that was David Wooding, Political Editor of Sun on Sunday, and let's just repeat those polls. Should we just leave on March the 29th as planned, deal or no deal? Yes, 47%. No, 28%. That is a pretty massive margin saying let's just get on with it, and it does very much confirm what I think. I think our political class are, well, at best out of touch with the electorate, but actually I think they're willfully trying to betray the Brexit vote. They don't think you should have had the referendum in the first place, and they certainly don't think you should have defied them, the big businesses, the big banks, and of course we even defied President Obama. How dare we? So folks, do you agree with the findings in this poll? You know, do you see yourself as one of the 28% who says no, we can't leave without having another referendum? And if that's how you feel, call me on 0345 6060 973. Or maybe you're one of the 47% who says just get on with it, deal or no deal. If that's how you feel, text to 84850. And please let me know, do you think I'm right to go back on the road with a Leave Means Leave campaign? Have I got it right? Have I got it wrong? You're never generally shy of telling me where I've gone wrong, in which case tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC. At LBC, of course, you can call as well. And as ever, you can watch us on Facebook and you can comment there too. Richard says to me by SMS, the EU Commission has no intention of offering any deal. There's more chance of finding the lost ark at a village jumble sale. Well, that's a nice, spicy way to start. And Vince Cable's been tweeting this morning. He says, I understand Nigel Farage returning to UK politics. The narrative of Brexit betrayal makes life more difficult for Theresa May and any attempt at compromise. Now there's a clearer choice between a no-deal Brexit and a people's vote with the option to stay in. Well, Vince, I just would say this to you. I do think that with proper leadership and with rallying proper business support, I do actually think that we could go to the European Commission and say, right, we're pressing the reset button. Look, guys, there's an awful lot of German motor cars driving around the UK. There's a heck of a lot of Prosecco going to be drunk at barbecues this afternoon. We are buying from you £80 billion worth of goods more every year than the other way round, and we'd be quite happy with a Canada-style trade deal with you, which of course would mean no open borders, no financial contributions. I do think we should have one last stab at that, but with them genuinely understanding that if that doesn't happen, we will walk away, and they will probably get much more badly hurt by this than we will. So I think there is a good motive for saying let's try and do that deal, but if not, we'll have a World Trade Organization deal. All this stuff about no deal, there is no such thing as a no deal. There are World Trade Organization rules out there. Countries like America trade with most of the world on those rules and do incredibly well. The point here is, everyone's trying to confuse this with economic arguments. The vote was a political choice. We voted leave. I feel, do you know something? I feel more strongly about this now than I did at the time of the referendum back in June 2016, and that's because of the way the politicians have behaved. It's despicable, in my view. Tell me I'm right. Tell me I'm wrong. Liam in Liverpool, good morning.
Good morning, Nigel. How are you?
I am well. So how do you see all of this, Liam? I mean, do you accept the findings of this poll, that there are a very big margin of people just want us to leave?
To be honest, mate, I don't. I find that number to be, I believe that number to be much lower. First of all, can I just say I'm glad that you are stepping back into politics, and putting your face out there, because I think you were the face of Leave for a lot of people when they were voting during the referendum.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad to see you back, and glad to see somebody passionate enough to actually take a stand. Basically, from my perspective, I'm 20 years old. I was 19 when I voted. The first time I ever voted, and I did vote to remain. I've done my research. I wasn't Leave.
Just speaking to that mouthpiece a little bit more clearly, Liam.
I do apologise.
That's it, right, I've got you, keep still. So the last I got is you were 19, it was your first vote, and you voted Remain, yeah?
Yes, I did. Like I said, I wasn't very much interested in politics, but I sat down with my grandparents.
Yeah.
Important it was for my future. So I've done a bit of research, weighed up the pros and cons from what I saw, from my perspective, and I decided to Remain. Obviously, is extortionate.
Liam, I keep losing it. We're going to try and get you on a landline. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. We'll wait to hear what Liam has to say. It's now 10:15. Well, earlier on this morning on LBC with Ian Payne, Tom Baldwin from the People's Vote campaign, a former Blair advisor, was telling us that he sees a significant shift happening in the country, and that is why their campaign has just received a £1 million donation from Julian Dunkerton, a multi-millionaire, and they're going to spend money on polling to drill down and to examine why people think it's all going to be a disaster. Mr. Dunkerton believes there is a shift going on in the country. Mr. Dunkerton, I'm very pleased to be able to tell you that you're absolutely right. There is a shift. As we've just learned from David Wooding's figures, with the Sun on Sunday poll, there are something like 2.4 million people who voted Remain, believing it was the right thing to do, who have now changed their mind and would vote to Leave. And I honestly believe one of the reasons behind this is just the sheer behaviour of the Barniers, the Verhofstadts, the Junckers. You know, the commissioners like Barnier, unelected, unremovable, dictating, humiliating a British Prime Minister throughout these negotiations. And I think people see that and think, this is a pretty anti-democratic, authoritarian, unpleasant club. Is it any wonder that Italy now has a Eurosceptic government? Is it any wonder that in the elections to take place on the 9th of September in Sweden, the Eurosceptic party may well win that election? So I think that's what the shift is. I think our politicians don't understand it, they don't get it, and one of my reasons for going out round the country is I want to teach these politicians a lesson they'll never forget. You should not betray the British public when they voted in a referendum. Right, we have a full switchboard. Let's get moving. Rita is a first-time caller from Westminster. Good morning, Rita.
Good morning.
So how do you feel, Rita? Are you one of the 47% who just says, let's get on with it and leave, or one of the 28% who thinks, maybe we need to have another vote?
Well, first of all, Nigel, can I say thank you so much for returning actively to the debate, i.e. planning to go and vote, which I think is fantastic.
Well, that's kind
and
of
yes, I am one of the 47% who thinks we should leave. Unlike you, I don't even think we should give them any more chance to negotiate. I think we should walk out and move forward. We have India, China, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, America, countries who are willing to do, in fact, they're waiting to do deals with us. We're only wasting time with these people who are never going to see our point of view.
Rita, you're probably right. I've always been just too reasonable in everything I've done in politics. I should be a bit more decisive. Now, all I'm saying is, Rita, that from the start of these negotiations, the one thing Barnier has known is that Mrs May was never going to walk out. Never going to walk out. I think if you press the reset button and go and say, no, actually, we really are going to go, you know, I wonder whether that might bear some fruit. But you may be right. You know, we're 2 years on from this. And when you hear, Rita, when you hear the British Medical Association telling you that if there's no deal, I mean, there could be a huge pandemic in this country, I mean, doesn't that worry you?
Well, no, you see, I think it all goes back to exactly what we do now. We are propping up a community of people, European community, we're propping them up. They're going to self-destruct within the next 5 to 10 years anyway. The money that we're injecting into this undemocratic organisation should now be spent on the NHS, on our police, on our education, areas in which we are failing and falling behind.
Yeah, well, I have to say, Rita, just looking at I mean, you live in London, just looking at the explosion of knife crime, and by the way, it's not happening just in London, but I think the argument for more bobbies on the beat, just generally rising crime across this country, I think those arguments are very, very powerful. And Rita, I tell you the other thing I want to ask you, the other piece of polling here that really stands out is when these people were asked, do you think the political classes are deliberately trying to make heavy weather of the Brexit talks in order to get us to change our mind? 48% agree, only 12% disagree. So it seems to me, Rita, that what's happening right now is we're losing faith in our politicians, perhaps even in our entire democratic system.
Well, I 100% agree. The sad reality is many of our politicians are being paid by Europe. Many of our organisations are funded by Europe, whether it's 1% or 50% is irrelevant. So they're all self-serving. Gina Miller, self-serving. This Julian Duncan, if he has so much money, why don't you give it to a reasonable charity instead of wasting it on prolonging an exercise which has already taken too long? We have a democratic vote in this country. The referendum was to leave, and as you say, we're 2 years on and no further to the end.
Yeah, I mean, Rita, I think these people are almost trying to deliberately trip the country up. We've chosen a course, we're trying to get there, and they just want to trip us up and try and stop the whole thing. Rita, thank you for your call. Thank you for your passion. Nigel, I disagree with you on many things, but on Brexit and the democratic mandate that has to be upheld and carried through, I do, says Tony. Well, Tony, this is actually about more than just whether we voted to leave or remain. It's actually about trust. We were told, were we not, by Mr. Cameron and others, we were told clearly, you decide and we will carry out your will. And that is simply not happening. Morning, Nige. I drive a cab. The number one Brexit comment I hear is former reluctant Remainers who would now vote to leave. Funny how my world is so different when I turn on the BBC, Sky Channel 4, etc. The politicians could not be more out of touch with reality. Keith, I often think London cabbies have a pretty good sense of actually where the public are thinking. Let's go to Chris, who's calling from Richmond. Chris, good morning.
Good morning. A couple of points I wanted to make to you, Nigel. Regarding the NHS, I don't know if I was interested to read a Twitter conversation with someone called Rachel Clark yesterday. You described the BMA as disgraceful, and then she made some rather interesting points about the fact that there's been a massive drop in the number of nurses coming to this country. I noticed you didn't choose to reply to that, Nigel. I wonder why that was.
Well, I had about 20,000 messages yesterday, Chris. It was rather a busy day, you might not be surprised to hear. And also, let me just say something. One of the main arguments here, and by the way, at 11 o'clock today, I'm going to talk about university. I'm going to talk about the fact that so many people are coming out of university with debt and almost not any improvement of their job prospects, whilst at the same time, Chris, we're not training enough nurses, we're not training enough engineers. There's a real problem here, and if we need to import nurses, Chris, from all over the world, we can do so. We always have to some degree, but shouldn't we, Chris, actually be using this moment as a means of rethinking about our young people and getting people actually trained in skills?
Well, maybe, Nigel, but it's going to take an awful long time to train nurses. The other point I wanted to make here...
Why not make a start, Chris? Why not, rather than relying on foreign labour for everything, why not start training our own young people to get vocational skills and jobs that they can actually work in for the rest of their lives?
Well, I don't think anyone has a problem with that, but we don't need Brexit to do it. The other point I want to make, people's votes, is which point of this conversation.
Yes, go on.
20 years ago, Nigel, I made a massive decision with respect to my life. I was offered a job as an accountancy tutor, having just qualified, and I was offered a job at a start-up. I chose the job at a start-up. I'd accepted the other job, and as a result of that decision, by joining the start-up, I made a significant difference to my personal situation financially. I'm in the house I'm in now because I made that decision. If I'd listened to the headhunter who said, you made a committed decision, you can't change your mind, you can't back out, my life would be very different to the one it is than what it is now. But apply that to Brexit. If people are not able to change their minds, Nigel, well, I don't understand why, because if you can change your mind
we did change our minds, Chris. We were told the common market was lovely and cuddly. We were given a referendum on it, and we chose by a majority of 2 to 1 to stay in the common market. We then, over the course of the next few years, saw it morph into something very different. We were asked, "Do you want to change your minds?" And we said, "Yes, we have changed our minds."
On false premises, Nigel. Yes, or on...
No. What? Name me one. A totally false premise.
Well, Gisela Stewart, Boris Johnson, Nigel Gove, there will be a points-based immigration system by the next election. It's already been dropped, Nigel. Correct or incorrect?
Well, and Chris, by the way, that is absolutely what people voted for in the referendum, and it's absolutely what they still want. There's nothing false about that. Brexit voters.
You know it's not going to happen.
Well, Chris, here's my point, right? Okay, here is where you and I are going to agree. I know what people voted for, and the people know what they voted for, and they're sick to death of being talked down to and told they're stupid, and they didn't understand, because they blooming well did. Chris, my point, and the reason for me going back on the road, is I trust the people, I do not trust our politicians, and the reason that pledge for an Australian-style point system has been dropped by Boris Johnson and others is because they're part of a political class, and they're all trying to water down Brexit, and what I want us to have, Chris, is the Brexit we voted for.
On 2 points. Firstly, they've dropped it because it's not feasible, and actually...
Not feasible?
Change it. No, because the Australian... Actually, if you want to bring immigration down, which was clearly the whole point of this, as far as you're concerned, actually, an Australian-style point system, as was pointed out at the time, actually leads to more immigration.
No. An Australian-style point system leads to as many people as you think you need in the country, but what you're doing... You're not just looking at numbers, you're looking at the type of people as well. That's the point, surely.
Well, first, it's not going to happen, so we know that. We can at least agree on that. Second question...
I don't agree. No, it is going to happen. It is going to happen. British politics, at some point, British politics has to start reflecting what people want.
Fine, Nigel. What about the next point? Is Turkey going to join the European Union? Yes or no? Tomorrow.
They've been paying Turkey billions for years. Billions in pre-accession aid. It is the passionate desire of the European Union for Turkey to join. It has been their passionate desire for a long time. Indeed, it was one of Mr. Cameron's own personal pet loves. He wanted Turkey to join the European Union. Since Mr. Erdogan has taken it down the Islamist route, it does not look very likely at this moment in time. But has it been for 20 years? Has it been for 20 years? And what at the time of the referendum, did David Cameron want Turkey to join the EU? Yes. Did the European Commission want Turkey to join the EU? Yes. Absolutely.
There's 27 other countries involved, and certainly a lot of them. So you have just admitted on live radio that it is unlikely that Turkey is going to join the European Union.
In the short term, because of what's happened with its government. But Chris,
how many of the conditions have they met? I think it's about 28 or 30. How many of those conditions have been met as of today, Nigel? You should know.
Well, the problem, Chris, is that whatever chapters were agreed are now subject to debate because there are serious human rights concerns about what Erdogan is doing. But is the European Union an expansionist bloc? Does it want the Ukraine to join? Of course it does. Does it want Turkey to join? Of course it does. It's an empire. The European Union is a political empire that seeks expansion. Can we agree on that?
Well, only for the right people. But the point is, you never said...
Do you agree that it's an expansionist organisation?
Yeah, but only under certain conditions. Turkey has been trying to join the European Union for about 35 years, Nigel. 35 years.
I think 1961 they first started discussing it. But the point is the British government wanted Turkey to join, therefore it was a legitimate debate about EU enlargement. Chris, do you accept the Sun's findings that a very big majority wants us just to leave rather than have a people's vote?
Well, there's polls on everything. There's another poll saying complete opposite this morning, that more people prefer the idea of a people's vote than before. You still haven't answered my point. Years ago, I made a life-changing decision, and I was allowed to change my mind. If I'd taken your approach, that headhunter would have committed me and said, "You know what, Chris, you can't change your mind about that job. You've got to take it."
Chris, we changed our minds. We changed our minds. We had 40 years of the entire political establishment saying the referendum in 1975 was the be-all and end-all. We were given the chance. We have changed our minds. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on RBC. It's now 10:31. The political class do not want the Brexit that we voted for, but the Sun on Sunday poll shows that the public still very much do, and by a strong margin, big majority, want us to leave at 11 p.m. on March the 29th next year. Deal or no deal, they're not listening to constant Project Fear. Now, fascinatingly, political machinations. Just a month after the Chequers deal, which so many in the Conservative Party and elsewhere saw as a complete sellout and total betrayal, there's now a new narrative coming from the government and from Dominic Raab. Front page of today's Sunday Telegraph: Tories launch Project No Fear as no deal scenario is set out. So they're now telling us a month after they wanted us to become a vassal state and telling us this was the only way forwards, that they're preparing for a no deal and they're going to start telling Europe they've got more to lose than we've got to lose, and actually some of the things I've been saying for years. Why are they doing this? Is this a genuine change of heart by the government? No, folks. I'll tell you why they're doing it. There's a wild beast out there on the loose, a dangerous, unkempt animal, wild, out of control, and it's called Boris Johnson. And they fear that with a Tory party conference coming up, and with Boris having now put himself very much on the side of the Eurosceptics, which actually is where 70 to 75% of the Conservative Party are, they fear that if the Prime Minister was to have another disaster at conference, perhaps some of you can remember the cringe-making speech last year, and if Bojo is seen to be the champion, then the 48 letters go in, and there's a leadership challenge. This is all being done to stop a Boris leadership challenge. Do not please take it at face value. Theresa May will not opt for a WTO deal. She wants us to remain as closely tied to all elements of the European project as she possibly can. Now, earlier on, I was talking to a 19-year-old Brexit voter called Liam in Liverpool. He explained to me why he'd voted to remain. He's, I hope, back on the line. Liam, hello. Liam.
Hello, Nigel, you okay?
Right, okay, carry on. You told us that you'd voted. You told us that you'd voted Remain. So, where does that leave you now, 2 years on?
It leaves me very much so still wanting to remain, to be honest. What you mentioned before about the 47% want to leave, I believe that number to be very much lower due to Theresa May's handling of the negotiations. I don't see how we can have somebody leading the negotiations who didn't want Brexit in the first place.
Well, on that, Liam, Liam, on that point, I would agree with you. And interestingly, if you look at Theresa May's personal poll rating, you know, she's running at minus 26% and Corbyn's running at minus 35%. And do you know something, Liam? I'm a little bit older than you. I can't remember any time in my adult life when both main party leaders were so unpopular. So I suggest to you, Liam, what the polling is telling you is the public have little confidence in May, don't believe in the way she's doing Brexit, but they still actually want Brexit.
That's what it seems like to me, but then again, that makes no sense. How can this country, as a democratic society, believe in one person to lead the negotiations for our future, for my future, and for my children's future? How can we trust this one woman to lead us to a better place when she didn't want Brexit in the first place?
I couldn't agree more.
She wants to go in with a hard Brexit, or no deal, whatever. Brexit means Brexit. Now, you said 47% want to leave.
Well, I think, Liam, the important thing here is that this 47% just want to leave. They're not interested in whatever the deal is. They're not listening to the scaremongering. They're saying it was a democratic decision, a political, not an economic decision, a political decision to leave the European Union, and they want it carried out.
Based on what, though? Because I believe the Leave voters to have been slightly misled.
Liam, we keep hearing this. We keep hearing.
Yeah,
but why don't we simplify this, Liam? Why don't we simplify this? The vote to remain was to remain part of a European political project. The vote to leave was to be independent. That, at the end of the day, is what this is really all about, isn't it?
Do you know what it is? And like I said, like I keep saying, I did vote to leave. I did vote to remain. Sorry, but we have the country as one has voted to leave now. Okay, fair enough with that. I don't believe in all this nonsense about the second referendum. I think it's complete nonsense. That just goes against the democratic society. No.
Okay,
I don't believe it. If we vote to leave, then we need to leave. My point is, I believe we need somebody who is capable of handling negotiations.
Yes.
She's not in any fit state to lead these.
Liam, I 100% agree with you. And can I also use a word to describe you? You are a Democrat, because you accept, although what you wanted didn't happen, that the will of the people must be obeyed. Thank you, Liam, very much indeed. We sort of got there in the end with that phone call, didn't we? The referendum result, says Catherine from South Wales, sent shockwaves through Parliament. A lot of MPs rejected the result to leave and are still in denial. The idea of a second vote on Leave Remain is an absolute betrayal of democracy. The people have already made their intentions known. As a Leave voter, I feel if a second vote was to take place, I would lose all faith in our democracy and Parliament. Well, Catherine, you believe that passionately, clearly, as a Leave voter, but I thought, wasn't it interesting that Liam, as a young Remain voter, says, look, whatever I think, we have to get on and do this, and that actually the problem, he thought, was Theresa May. Difficult, really, to disagree. I get on Twitter. I was originally a Remainer, but I have since done a complete 180. I want us to walk away today. No deal, and I'm not alone. Friends and family are shifting for Remain to Leave too. Lefty Remainers might not get the result they want from a second referendum. Well, actually, that's very interesting, isn't it? I mean, that was the point David Wooding was making, is if we went through it all again, you may well find a much bigger margin of people would vote to leave. And yet, believe me, they won't give up. They will not give up. The interests of the giant multinational businesses are very much tied to this European project. They want unlimited cheap labour. They want a regulatory rule book that they effectively write themselves to the detriment of small and medium-sized businesses. The big businesses love the EU club. It's the best thing that's ever happened to them. And it's why, in many ways, this is a battle between the little people and the big people. It really, really is. Sam is a first-time caller from Lincoln. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Nigel. How are you?
Good morning. I'm very well indeed. So, do you believe these polling figures or not?
Well, in actual fact, I haven't seen the polling figures. I don't normally read The Sun,
okay.
So I wasn't aware of them. But what I would like, Nigel, would you offer us all some clarity on your position with regards to the second referendum?
Yeah, have one or not? I don't want a second referendum. If we have one, and I've been saying, Sam, for a long time, wake up, Leave voters. The Remain side are organising for a second referendum. And I said that 6 months ago, and I wasn't wrong. Mr. Soros' money is coming in. Mr. Blair is there. Mr. Clegg is there. Mr. Cable is there. There's now a whole People's Vote campaign. So I've said to Leave voters, prepare yourself mentally, because the other side are getting ready for this. Now, I very much...
Could I just dip in there?
Yep.
Because the reason why I'm intrigued is because you gave an interview to the Mirror on the 16th of May 2016, just before the referendum.
Which has been so wildly misquoted, Sam, I can't believe it. In which I said if it was 48-52 for Remain, there would be some unreconciled in the Conservative Party who would see it as unfinished business, but that in reality it would be at least 25 years before we had another referendum. And I promise you one thing, Sam, if Remain had won, there'd be no discussion of a second referendum. It wouldn't even be on the agenda.
I would like to say something else as well, which is I think all of us have been let down, because I think the referendum structure was poor. I think it should have had a much higher margin, because effectively what we're saying now is that under a million... What was the actual figure voting Leave more than Remain out of those that voted?
We're getting on for 3.9% or something like that.
And what does that translate to in actual numbers, actual citizens?
A couple of million.
Okay, so a couple of million more.
Which actually, Sam, is a massive margin compared to the votes people get to become Prime Minister. Okay. It was it was the greatest exercise in democracy in the history of the United Kingdom.
Well, I disagree with that as well, because I would feel that democracy relies on truth and it relies on clarity of information. I'm afraid, I must state this, obviously you'd probably recognise from the kind of things I'm saying that I voted for Remain, and I still believe that we should remain in the European Union. Probably to make matters worse for you, I actually live in France, so my position is going to be terribly precarious if we have a no deal.
Precarious? What's going to happen to you, Sam?
Well, what's going to happen to me, let me just state this clearly.
But are the EU such unpleasant authoritarian dictators that they'll put you in prison or throw you out? I mean, they sound like horrible people, Sam.
I'm sorry?
They sound like horrible people.
From what I've said, from me.
Well, you're saying that you're saying that you're worried about your future living in France as a result of the Leave vote. I mean, are they that nasty in Brussels?
Well, Nigel, you should know you lived in Brussels for many years.
I know.
You were educated in international Brussels, so I would imagine that you.
I did what? Sorry.
I believe your children were educated in Brussels, weren't they?
No, they weren't. Sam, thanks ever so much. You're listening to the Sunday edition of the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 10:46. Well, there's no doubt that some Remainers are very, very passionate. They hate the referendum result. They will do anything they can to overturn it. They absolutely want a second referendum, which many of us think would be a complete betrayal of democracy. And I don't doubt it, that when some of these people call and say what they say, they mean it. However, I think we've got to accept that they are very much in a minority. You know, and of course polls vary and there's margin of error and all the rest of it, but this is pretty devastating stuff, isn't it? I mean, when the Sun on Sunday poll asks people, should we just leave? No conditions, should we just leave on March 29th next year? As planned, 47% say yes, only 28% say no. That is a massive, huge, vast margin, and it's because a significant number of people who voted Remain, rather like young Liam from Liverpool who we had on earlier, they're Democrats. They say we've got the vote, we were promised it would be implemented, let's just get on with it. Let's go to Felixstowe and speak to Godfrey. Good morning, Godfrey.
Good morning, Nigel. Yes, well, I just hope that the Sun figures are going to be played out in reality, because I feel that our political classes are betraying us. And,
I do too.
We said we don't want to remain, and it seems to me they're being influenced by the multinational corporations who've got a lot of money to hire lobbyists and all that kind of thing, and then we get the public service broadcasters broadcasting the big business agenda.
Do you know, the remarkable thing, Godfrey, if you think about it, is the Establishment Remain campaign is in full cry. It is organised, it's got its press departments, it's got its constant messaging going out, and the Leave campaign has kind of pretty much packed up. Little isolated groups all over the place, and one of the reasons I want to try and get this thing going out on the road is I think when the public start to hear the counters to what they're being told, I think that margin, Godfrey, that we've seen in the Sun on Sunday will get even bigger, and it'll mean that actually the MPs will start to become frightened of the voters in their constituencies.
Well, of course, there's nothing like change his mind of MPs being frightened of the voters in their constituencies.
Yes, that's right.
They might not get elected.
It does concentrate the mind ever so slightly,
well,
Godfrey.
They might have to get a proper job.
Well, I'm not sure half of them could. So,
no, I'll tell you, I actually thank you. I mean, I always knew before I voted Leave that the EU organisation was undemocratic, but listening to you, you keep coming up with things that I didn't know that are even more undemocratic than I really thought it was.
I mean, the one thing, I do understand, Godfrey. I mean, people say to me, Mrs. May's making a mess of it. I can agree with that, but I still fail to understand, you know, other than it's the status quo, I still fail to understand what it is about a system of government where unelected bureaucrats are the most powerful people in the system and have the sole right to make law. I still find it hard to believe, Godfrey, that anyone can think that's a good form of government.
Yes, well, I say I'm old enough to have been around and eligible to vote before the first EU referendum, and my reply to all this fear, uncertainty and doubt, well, we managed all right before there was an EU, why shouldn't we be all right again? And the other thing is, I know a lot of people, a lot of presenters on LBC poo-poo it. I'm afraid I want my sovereignty back.
Well, Godfrey, yes, I mean, isn't that almost one of the most basic things that human beings have wanted, for all time, is the ability to have some say directly over their own future. Godfrey, I thank you. Tracy says, we had the vote. Another shouldn't be on the cards. We should at least have our first decision respected before another vote. That's the Jacob Rees-Mogg line. Jacob supports a second referendum in 20 to 30 years. Time. On Twitter, I voted Leave to leave the EU, 100% Leave. I wasn't misled by you, Boris, Trump, or even Putin. That's very, very good. How would Remainers feel if they had won and the government tried to overturn their decision? Marion, in Jarrow, I promise you, if Remain had won by one vote, there would be no public discourse, no debate about a second referendum whatsoever, because what you'd have is a parliament that overwhelmingly supported that victory by one vote. The basic problem here, folks, it's simple. The people have one view, and our politicians and their big business supporters have another. That is at the heart of all of this. That's certainly what I think, anyway. What does Anna in Worcester make of all of this? Good morning, Anna.
First and foremost, I want to say I actually voted to leave.
Right.
And I haven't changed my opinion.
Right.
This is a problem I have. I've been listening avidly to the Brexit committee, and here's where the problem is. We cannot leave based on what we agreed in December. It puts us in a loop. What it's saying is, if nothing is agreed, one is not conditional on the other. If nothing is agreed, then we go round in a loop, and we're in a reverse customs position.
I think, Anna, what you're just to explain more broadly, I think, Anna, you're referring to this backstop that Mrs. May. Yeah. Now, you know, when she did that, Anna, you know, I was saying this is a complete sellout. It's a complete betrayal, and I was on my own. Virtually nobody else joined me. Everybody in the Conservative Party said, oh, well, we'll just have to go along with it for the sake of party unity. Anna, I think with whatever has happened in the last 2 years with Mrs. May...
conditionality.
Right. Isn't
agreed now. If we pull out, we do not leave on WTO terms. We're in a reverse customs union position. And a lot of people that voted out have got to understand this. Because there's no conditionality. And now Dominic Raab has got the brass neck cheek to turn round and say he's trying to build it in now in terms of parallel talks and good faith. Well, a civil servant has said in international treaties where you don't agree, you have to stick by what the other side said. That's never been done before, and that is what Theresa May has done. We cannot leave the European Union because of the backstop agreed in December.
Right. Anna,
people have got to understand that.
Anna, what needs to happen is either Theresa May needs to metamorphosize over the course of the next couple of weeks and become a very different human being, or she's got rid of, and you have a new leader, and you go along and say, I am sorry. I'm really sorry. Let's apologise to Monsieur Barnier. I'm sorry. We've been wasting your time for the last 2 years. We've been playing your appeasement game. We've decided to press the reset button. Let's forget everything that's been talked about. It's not getting any of us anywhere, and let's start again. Anna, that's the only way forward with this.
If the European says, no, we're not going to press the reset button, we have an agreement to go round...
Well, then we get rid of that agreement.
How do we do that, Nigel?
Well, we vote against it. We declare we are not sticking by that agreement. That agreement was supposed to be part of a negotiation, and she went way further than she had the authority to do. She did it through deception, and ultimately, this comes down to political will. You know, the British government can pretty much do whatever it likes if it has political will. I can see you're worried about the backstop. You're right to be. Anna, thank you. I've got time for one more caller. Marty is calling from Belfast. Good morning, Marty.
Good morning, Nigel. I'm a little bit confused, and I'm hoping you can help me out by answering a question. It's over this second referendum, or potential second referendum. Nothing is going to happen until Theresa May comes back with either a yay or a nay on the deal, and that's going to be when, October?
It's due to be October the 19th. I mean, all these things can shift and change, obviously.
Well, let's assume that miracles happen, and on October the 19th, the deal comes back. To then turn around and say, right, okay, I've changed my mind. Yes, public opinion is such that we should have a referendum on this deal. Is there not something that stopped a referendum happening within a certain period of time? Because I think from memory, it was about 6 months from when they said, right, referendum is going to happen in January, and it happened in the middle of June.
Oh, look, Marty, if they wanted...
It would be well past the 29th.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, that is an argument. However, if Parliament wanted to call a referendum, and provided the Electoral Commission didn't object, I think 6 weeks it could happen in quite comfortably.
Okay, fair enough.
So
it is possible.
It is possible
to actually then happen.
It is possible,
assuming that the deal is ratified on or by October 19th.
Well, I mean, the truth of it is, of course, there'll be a deal, but it won't be ratified until it goes through every other member state parliament. So there are some that say, Marty, actually, even if the second referendum has got their way, it would come after the 29th of March 19. But that's why, actually, Marty, the big project now for those that want to remain is not a second referendum, as they're telling you. Actually, they want to suspend Article 50, and that will be the big battleground this autumn, in my view. Thank you very much indeed.